In this lecture, I will implement the prototype pattern. To do that, go to the core patterns project, source, right click on one of the packages, new class, call it game. Game is the use case we are working on, and the package is com.bharat.patterns.prototype. Click on the add button because our class needs to implement the clonable interface so that its instances can be cloned. Finish. Double click to maximize. Let's add a couple of fields here. Private int ID for every game and private string name of the game. Select them. You can generate the getters and setters. Go to source, generate getters and setters. Select all. I want it after the last field, which is name, generate. Format it. Every class already has a clone method that it inherits from the java.lang.object, and this interface implementation here allows the instance of that class to be cloned. Let me show you that clone method. We can override it. Type in clone, hit control space, select this clone method. You can see the documentation creates and returns a copy of this object. So on whichever object you invoke the clone method, it will return a copy of that object. This is how the clone method would look like. You can typecast this to game. Instead of returning an object, you can hit Ctrl 1 here, add a typecast to game, because we know that we are going to return an instance of game. And it throws a clone not supported exception. If you want to throw that exception here, you can implement the clone method and throw the clone not supported exception so that no one will be able to clone your class object. So that's the simplest implementation of the prototype pattern. Now we can create a test, right click, new class, call it test with a main method, finish. Double click to maximize, Control D to delete that. Create a new game instance, hit Ctrl 1, assign statement to a new local variable, call this game1. Game1.set ID is 1. Game1.set the name of the game is Overwatch. One of my favorite games when I worked for Blizzard Entertainment in Austin. Overwatch, you can add your own favorite game. Now another player comes in and he wants to play the same game. Instead of instantiating from scratch using the new operator, we'll say game2 instance is equal to game1.clone. That will give us a new instance. This guy, there are a few things we need to handle here. Hit Ctrl 1. We need to handle that clone not supported exception if it is thrown. Do a sysout game1 and sysout game2 to show you that those two objects are two different instances. Run as Java application. Double click to maximize. See, there are two different instances. One instance is cloned from the first instance. To show how the properties will appear, go back to the game and let's override the toString method. For these two properties, go to source, generate the toString method using ID and name. I want that at the end of everything. After set name, generate. Save it, rerun the test. This time we'll see the properties on these two objects, which is exactly the same. So that is how you can implement the prototype pattern. Instead of creating an instance from scratch, will save a lot of time and performance, especially in huge applications which have a lot of properties and state, which have external resources like files, database connections, etc. All that can be reused if required using the prototype pattern. One object will have all of them, and then we can quickly create multiple objects using the clone method instead of creating every object from scratch.